It was a few weeks ago when I started my first night shift at the hospital. I had been a nurse for over 5 years, but night shifts were new to me. I took the job to get away from my messy breakup. I thought it would give me some stability. The hospital felt old and a bit grimy. The lights flickered, casting weird shadows down the long hallways. The first couple of nights went fine. I checked on patients, filled out paperwork, and sipped my lukewarm coffee. But on my third night, I heard something. It was faint music, like a lullaby, coming from the pediatrics ward. It puzzled me. I thought maybe an old speaker was malfunctioning. As I walked closer, my heart raced. There hadn't been any children in that ward for days. It felt wrong. I approached the door and paused. I wondered if I should turn back. Instead, I stepped forward. The laughter stopped. I leaned against the wall and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. Just silence. My mind raced. I felt cold sweat at the back of my neck. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to push it aside, but then I heard a child's laughter echoing from the empty playroom. I stood still, my breath caught in my throat. "Hello." I called out, but I heard nothing. Just silence. I felt uneasy but still wanted to go forward. Instead, I turned back to my paperwork, hands shaking. That's when the music played again, clearer this time. It felt like a weight on my chest. I glanced at the clock. It was past the hour when the night should settle. I should be called my supervisor, but I didn't want to sound crazy. Maybe it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. Finally, I gathered my courage. I made my way back to the pediatrics ward. The air felt heavy, like I was pushing through thick fog. Each step dragged on. The door was slightly ajar. I felt cool air spill from inside, sending chills down my spine. I stepped in, and again I heard the laughter, a child's laugh, echoing off the walls. My heart pounded. "Is anyone there?" I yelled. Silence. Then that laughter came again, closer this time. I felt a chill creeping down my back. I turned around quickly, but nothing was there. Just darkness in the room. I was about to leave when the music started again, right behind me. I spun slowly, and there it was. A shadow standing still, staring straight at me. Something deep inside me screamed to run. Then the shadow whispered something I couldn't understand. Panic flooded through me, and I ran like I'd never run before. Now, every time I close my eyes, I hear that music. It loops in my head, like a twisted lullaby. I never figured out what it all meant. Some things in that old hospital, I guess, I'm better off not knowing. The next night, I showed up to work with a knot in my stomach. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, heard the music. I thought about calling in sick, but I couldn't let fear win. I needed this job. As I clocked in, the same fluorescent lights flickered above me. I tried to shake off my anxiety. I would stick to my routine. I would ignore the pediatrics ward. The night dragged on in the same pattern: patient checks and paperwork. Sometimes, I caught myself glancing at the clock, counting down the hours until my shift was over. But then, right around midnight, I heard it again. The music floated through the air, soft yet haunting, that I froze, my heart pounding. I hadn't imagined it this time. It was real. My first instinct was to get security, but the weight of dread settled in my gut. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't let it control me. With trembling hands, I made my way to the pediatrics ward. Every step felt like dragging my feet through molasses. The laughter was gone, but the melody remained, lingering like a ghost in the air. That I reached the door. It creaked open, revealing a dim glow. The playroom lights were on, the last thing I expected. I hesitated. Who would turn on the lights in an empty ward? I peeked inside, and that's when I saw it that a toy box was overturned. Dolls were scattered across the floor, their blank stares unsettling in the half-light. My heart raced. I waited for some sign, a sound or movement, but nothing happened. Everything felt so still, then a ball rolled across the floor as if pushed by an unseen hand. "No," I whispered, backing away. The laughter rang out again, a playful giggle that seemed to dance around me. It was like the sound of a child enjoying a game. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but curiosity held me in place. "Who's there?" I shouted, this time more forcefully. The response was immediate silence, followed by that soft lullaby. Panic bubbled in my chest, but I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air grew colder, the atmosphere thick with dread. I approached the playroom, my feet moving against my will, drawn by an invisible force. I turned my back to the door, trying to face whatever was in the room. That was my mistake. When I turned around, I was met with something even darker than the space around me, a small figure standing in the corner, almost blending into the shadows. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Was it a child? Just as I opened my mouth to speak, the music intensified, echoing wildly. The figure darted forward, vanishing just as quickly as it appeared. My heart raced. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently before plunging the room into darkness. "Help!" I yelled, but instead of a response, I heard soft laughter, echoing off the walls. Then everything went silent. I know I should have fled, but something compelled me to stay, to understand. I took a step forward and tripped over something. I fell to the ground and felt my hand brush against a cold object. I picked it up and shone my phone light on it. My breath caught. It was a small, worn-out teddy bear. There was a name stitched into its side that I read, Maggie. That's when I knew I was in even deeper than I thought. Who was Maggie? And what had I stumbled into? I sat on the floor, the cold teddy bear clutched in my trembling hands. Maggie. The name echoed in my mind, but I could only grasp at the thin threads of memory. A child? A patient? My heart pounded louder at the idea of the little girl. What happened to her? The darkness around me felt alive, thickening the air. I needed to get back to the light. I forced myself to my feet and aimed my phone into the shadows, searching for the playroom door. I had to leave. But the laughter came again, echoing hauntingly, and I felt chills run down my spine. That I took a shaky step, then another, toward the light. That's when I noticed the walls. They were decorated with crayon drawings that seemed to come alive in the dimness, faces staring out with wide eyes and grim expressions. Who had drawn these? Then, amidst the chaos of drawings, one caught my eye. It was a simple stick figure, its scribbled body jutting out awkwardly. A small curly-haired head with an enthusiastic smile and a bunny next to it. I shook my head. It wasn't just the drawing. It was the direct stare that unnerved me, too intense for a child's drawing. Maggie? I whispered, the name hanging in the air. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I caught another movement. In my periphery, a small shape darted past. My breath caught in my throat. I turned quickly only to find nothing there. The laughter echoed again, this time closer, almost right behind me. "Stop it!" I yelled, frustration rising in my chest. I felt foolish calling out to what I couldn't see. But then, faintly, amidst the chuckle, I heard something else. A voice, soft, innocent. "Come play." A wave of nausea hit me. "Play?" I echoed, bewildered. I had no idea what kind of game I was being drawn into. With the teddy bear still tightly gripped, one thought burned in my mind: I needed to find Maggie. That I stumbled back towards the door, using the light from my phone to guide me. As I reached for the handle, the door creaked open on its own. It swung wide, revealing the empty corridor beyond. Something nagged at the back of my mind. I couldn't just leave. Not yet. There had to be answers. I took a step outside the playroom. The laughter faded, and the corridor lay in silence. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own racing heart. I focused on the laughter, trying to figure out where it had come from, but the sound mingled with the emptiness of the hospital like a forgotten tune. As I hesitated, something caught my eye at the end of the hall. There was a small door, slightly ajar. My heart pounded. I felt the pull of curiosity again, clear yet terrifying. I took a cautious step forward, gripping my phone tightly, ready for whatever I might find. Just as I reached for the doorknob, a voice whispered at my back, "Don't go." I turned sharply, but there was nothing there. The laughter burst out again, and this time it was a chorus, many voices echoing, blending into a chaotic sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. "Please," I whispered, desperation creeping into my tone. "What do you want from me?" I turned back to the door, my next move blending alarm and determination. I had to find out who Maggie was and whatever was happening. I was already too far in. As I pushed the door open wider, a strange chill swept through the air, almost pulling me inside. I stepped through the threshold, heart racing, wondering what awaited me on the other side. The room beyond the door was small and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the chaotic atmosphere of the playroom. Dust danced in the air as I stepped inside, and I noted old hospital equipment piled up against the walls, as if they had been forgotten. A strange smell, part antiseptic and part something sweeter, lingered. I wrinkled my nose, the laughter faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that pressed against my ears. I felt as though I had crossed into another world, one that thrummed with a latent energy I couldn't quite understand. My phone illuminated fragments of the past: a rusted toy box, a deflated exercise ball, and plastered against the wall, more crayon drawings. Closer inspection revealed a larger mural that consumed the far end of the room. It was a palette of dark colors, swirling shapes, and scribbled phrases that sent chills racing down my spine: "Maggie's room and play with us forever." A sense of dread enveloped me as I pieced together the implications hidden within the artwork. I stepped back, my heart pounding wildly. "Maggie?" My voice quavered more than I intended. Then, I saw a flicker of movement in the corner of my vision. I whipped around, and there she was, a small figure dashing behind a stack of boxes. A flash of curly hair, the same shade as that stick figure, and the disarming smile frozen on a child's face. "Maggie!" I called out, eager yet terrified. I hurried toward the boxes, but as I reached them, she was gone. There was no sound, just a heavy silence. The laughter began again, echoing through the small room, merging with my rising panic. I felt my breath quicken. I couldn't lose her. I needed to know what happened. "Please!" I shouted, the urgency in my voice bouncing off the walls. "Where are you?" Nothing but silence answered back. I scanned the corners of the room, desperate for a sign. The teddy bear felt colder in my grip, heavier. Just as I was about to give in to despair, a door on the far wall creaked open. I froze, my instincts screaming for me to stay put. But something compelled me to move forward, drawn to the door like a moth to a flame. I set my phone on a nearby table to light my way as I approached. The crack in the doorway revealed a glimpse of darkness beyond. Something about the sheer black made my stomach twist. A sick sense of anticipation filled the air. Then, just as I reached out to grab the handle, a cold hand grasped my wrist from behind. I turned sharply, my pulse racing, ready to flee. But instead, I came face to face with another figure, this one much taller. A shadow loomed before me, the ridged outline indistinct under the low light. I swallowed hard, and before I could scream, it whispered, "Maggie needs you." Every instinct shouted at me to run, but I stood frozen as the air crackled around us. I knew whatever was tied to Maggie was just a step away, waiting for me to take that leap into darkness. I stared at the shadow, my breath caught in my throat. The whisper echoed in my ears, but instead of fear, it sparked a need to understand. "Maggie?" I managed to say, my voice trembling. The figure stayed still, its presence both unnerving and oddly magnetic. She is lost, it said, the voice as soft as the rustling of leaves. You can help her. Help her? I asked, hardly believing the words coming out of my mouth. How? Marinating in confusion, an unsettling awareness washed over me. This was no ordinary interaction, and the stakes felt dangerously high. The figure pointed toward the door behind me. Follow, it instructed, and I saw a glimmer of something in its eyes. Was it desperation? Or perhaps a plea? I glanced back at the doorway. The darkness behind it seemed thicker, almost alive. My resolve cracked. I didn't have time to calculate the risks. I can't just leave, I whispered, feeling my heart pound against my ribs, torn between instinct and curiosity. Maggie's world is fading, the figure insisted, stepping closer. You only need to believe. In a flash of courage and uncertainty, I took a step towards the door. The cold air licked at my skin, urging me to proceed. I turned back to the figure, but it was already receded into darkness, leaving me alone. My skin crawled as anxiety spooled within me. The laughter echoed again, distant yet familiar. I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. The room shifted, the colors warped around me like a living painting. I found myself in a narrow corridor that stretched into black voids on either side. Shadows loomed in the corners, but the laughter drew me down the hall. With every step, the air thickened, drowning out any rational thought. Where are you, Maggie? I called out, my voice echoing against the warped walls. A flicker caught my eye, and I turned to see a figure dart past one of the shadows. It wasn't Maggie. My heart raced as I readied myself for confrontation. Is someone there? I demanded, my voice firming up but still trembling. The laughter morphed, taking on an ominous quality. The sound twisted in my ears, a sinister melody that made my skin crawl. Then, another sound broke the tension, a soft, whimpering cry from behind a door to my right. The noise felt heavy with sorrow, and I rushed toward it. Maggie? I reached for the rusty doorknob, my hand shaking. Against my better judgment, I twisted it open. A wave of stale air hit me like a brick, and the sight before me sent my heart plummeting. The room was filled with toys, but they were all broken and discarded, scattered across the floor like remnants of forgotten joy. The dim light flickered, revealing a lone figure crouched in the corner, a girl with curls framing her worn face. Maggie! I shouted, relief washing over me. But as she looked up, her eyes were void of the innocence I hoped to find. They were wide with fear, darting between me and the shadowed corners. Run! She cried. They're coming. Before I could react, a chilling roar echoed through the hall, reverberating off the walls, drowning out her plea. My heart raced as I turned to face the emerging darkness. Something was right, and an icy dread clawed inside me. I took a step back, ready to escape, but the door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate with an ominous finality. I was trapped. The room closed in around me, a prison of discarded toys and frayed memories. I could feel the walls breathing, each pulse a reminder of the looming danger. Maggie's eyes were wide, and her fear was palpable. I glanced to my right where the roar had come from. Shadows there danced and twisted, forming grotesque shapes that flickered at the edges of my sanity. We have to go. I urged, but her trembling form remained rooted. They'll find us. She whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder as if something were creeping closer, invisible yet palpable. That I moved cautiously toward her, my heart pounding loudly. I'm not leaving you here. I won't let anything happen to you. Yet with each step, the shadows crept closer, whispering my fears back to me. Then, I noticed something glinting in the dim light on the floor, a broken toy. It was a small, metal car, its bright red paint chipped and dull. A strange sense of nostalgia washed over me, but the back of my mind screamed that it shouldn't exist here. Maggie, look. I picked it up, hoping to distract her from whatever lurked in the corners. Do you remember this? Her gaze softened for a brief moment, but as the roar echoed again, it shattered the moment. Please, you don't understand. It knows you're here. A jolt of fear coursed through me. What knows? My voice was barely a whisper, the truth clawing at my throat. Suddenly, the room shifted, the shadows extending themselves, clawing at the walls as if the darkness was alive. I turned, panic rising as I saw a figure forming in the shadows, a large silhouette with elongated limbs, twisting grotesquely. Get back! I yelled, instinctively placing myself in front of Maggie. But the presence seemed inescapable, its eyes glowing menacingly from the gloom. Out of reflex, I hurled the broken toy at the figure. It shattered with a clatter against the floor, but the creature merely swayed, unfazed. I started to back away, trying to coax Maggie to her feet. Maggie, we need to move. But as I stepped away from her, she remained frozen, eyes wide and unfocused. You can't leave me. It's going to take you. I tugged at her arm, desperation creeping into my voice. This isn't your world, Maggie. We can find a way out together. Trust me. At that moment, another roar erupted, closer than before. It was a sound of something primal and angry, a call to a darker instinct. The shadows responded, closing in like a wave about to crash. Just then, a sliver of light broke through the darkness, the sound of the distant door creaking open. I turned toward it, my heart racing. That's our way out. I shouted, dragging Maggie toward the light. But the figure lunged, the air crackling with a suffocating weight that I had to choose. Stand my ground with Maggie or risk everything for freedom. That's when I saw it, an odd symbol on the wall, faintly glowing as if it were calling me. I stared at it, trying to understand. Could this be the way out? Maggie's grip tightened around my arm. Don't! She cried. But it was too late. The shadows were closing in, and I had to make a choice. I reached for the symbol, my fingers just grazing the surface. The moment I touched it, an electric shock coursed through me, warmth spreading like wildfire. The shadows paused, hovering uncertainly as if caught in a trance. I felt something stir within me, a surge of courage and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. Maggie, look! I shouted, aware of the shadows starting to twitch at the edges but hoping against hope the light would hold them back. I think it can help us. But instead of responding, her eyes darted back to the looming figure. It won't let you go. You have to let me go. Her voice cracked, anguish choking out any chance of hope. No. I insisted, moving closer to the symbol, my heart racing with every beat. We can do this together. I had never believed in mystical powers or symbols, but desperation often bred strange attachments that it flickered before my eyes, a swirling mix of colors that seemed to resonate with my heartbeat. I drew in a deep breath, blocking out the echoing roar that once again filled the room. Maggie, hold on to me. I could feel the shadows twitching, their whispers growing into a cacophony. They claimed my name, twisted it into something jeering and bitter. Every breath I took felt heavy, as if the air was thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Maggie hesitated, but the terror on her face urged me to press forward. Just trust me. I repeated, my hand still raised to the symbol. We have to push through. With every ounce of will, I put my palm flat against the glowing symbol and allowed the warmth to consume me. A power reverberated through the space, radiating from me as if breaking a seal. The room shook, bookshelves rattled, toys clattered to the ground, and the shadows contorted in response to my newfound strength, but with each second, I felt a tether grow between me and the shadowy figure. It was pulling back, retreating but not gone. It thrashed with frustration, dark tendrils reaching out toward me. I could sense it, desperate to reclaim its hold. Maggie, now! I urged, holding my ground as the shadows whipped around us. I had no idea what would happen if we actually made contact with the light, but staying created a certainty that chilled me more than the dark ever did. Please, let us go. She cried out finally, her resolve breaking. She stepped toward me, hesitantly at first, but with the shadow looming above, she seemed to find her own spark of bravery. The moment she stepped beside me, we pushed into the light together. It surrounded us, a force that felt both familiar and foreign, igniting something deep inside. Another tremor rippled through the room, shaking the darkness that fought against us, trying to reassert its power. As we moved forward, everything went wild. The shadows shrieked, a sound I could feel scraping against my insides. The glowing symbol pulsed, weaving a path for us toward the open door. I could see it clearer now, light poured in, promising an escape. Then everything went dark. My breath caught in my throat as everything around me shifted violently. One moment we were racing for safety, the next, it felt as if we were spinning blindly in a void. The silhouette vanished, but so too did the tingle of safety. "Maggie!" I shouted, but my voice echoed back to me, drowned in silence. Panic surged through me. Where was she? I reached out, trying to find her in the dark, but my hands met nothing. Then, ahead, just at the edge of whatever dark space we were lost in, I saw it, a flicker of light, but this time colder, sharper. It didn't want us free. It beckoned with sinister intent. I steeled myself and took a shaky step toward the light. Whatever was watching us from the shadows wasn't finished yet, and I couldn't shake the feeling we hadn't escaped at all. With each step toward the flickering light, unease twisted in my stomach. The glow drew me in, but it felt wrong, like it was meant to ensnare, not liberate. I strained to listen, hoping to catch a sound that wasn't just my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Maggie!" I called out again, but the silence swallowed my voice whole. I forced myself not to panic. She had to be nearby. I couldn't think of anything else. Suddenly, a soft hum danced through the air, a melody that felt both nostalgic and eerie. It wrapped around me, tugging at something deep within my mind. I froze. Somewhere in the back of my thoughts, I recognized that tune. It was a lullaby, eerily sweet yet overshadowed by desperation. Hadn't I heard it before? Yes, Maggie used to sing it to her little brother when he was scared. "Maggie!" I shouted again, taking another step. The light seemed to pulse in rhythm with the melody, and every passing moment felt like a race against an unseen clock. I had to find her. The humming shifted, plunging into a sudden minor key. The shadows coiled around me, closing in like looming clouds. I could almost feel them whispering, desperate to invade my thoughts. Their words were indistinct, but the tone was clear mockery, disdain. I shivered, clenching my fists as a surge of anger rose to the surface. I wouldn't be their victim. Then, as if responding to my defiance, the ground beneath me trembled. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. The flickering light flickered wildly, its halo growing jagged. I caught glimpses of grotesque shapes swirling within the darkness, faces contorted with anguish. They stared directly at me, eyes glinting with malevolence. "Stop it!" I yelled, breaking the quiet dread that had settled around me. The shadows shuddered slightly as if my words had cut through their grip for just a moment. In that fleeting respite, I saw something shift in the distance. A figure emerged from the light, seeming almost tangible. "Help!" she cried out, and a wave of relief washed over me. It was Maggie. But that relief evaporated when I noticed the desperate look in her eyes and the shadows clawing at her ankles, dragging her back toward the cold light. "No! Maggie!" I lunged forward instinctively, fighting against the pulling weight of the dark. "Maggie, reach for me!" I shouted, stretching out my hand. Her outstretched arm barely grazed mine, but it was enough to stoke my determination. With every ounce of strength I could summon, I charged into the luminous abyss. The shadows lashed out, slashing at me like 1,000 icy fingers. I refused to falter. I could see the anxious waves in Maggie's face. Fear shattered my focus, yet somehow, beneath it all, I sensed something deeper brewing, a quiet power we shared. Together. I cried. I drew her closer, feeling the warm flicker of that same force I had felt earlier at the symbol, but just then, the cold light surged forward, a tidal wave of force that ripped through our connection. The shadows screeched, drowning my voice once more, and everything around us flickered like an old film about to tear. Then I saw it, a door to the side, barely visible through the chaos. My heart raced, adrenaline surging as I turned to Maggie. This way. Yet before we could reach it, a dark entity loomed in front of us. It was waiting, and I could feel its hunger. Everything went black again. I came to in a dark space, disoriented and cold. My body felt heavy, as if weighed down by lead. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear the fog from my mind. The silence pressed against me, thick and suffocating. Maggie? I called out, my voice echoing into the void, but receiving no reply. I sat up slowly, feeling the rough ground beneath my palms. The flickering light had vanished, and the oppressive darkness only deepened. As I took a moment to gather myself, I heard a faint sound, a rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on a table. It was soft, but urgent. My breath caught in my throat. I turned my head in the direction of the sound, my heart pounding again. Maggie? I whispered, hoping against hope that she could hear me. The tapping grew louder and, against my better judgment, I crawled towards it. Each movement felt risky, a gamble with the unseen. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I jerked my hand back, feeling my pulse quicken. That wasn't just cold, it was a heavy, oppressive chill. Suddenly, the tapping stopped, replaced by a low whisper that slithered through the air. I strained to make out what was being said, but the words were indistinct, indecipherable. Panic bubbled up inside me again. I needed to find Maggie. I couldn't stay here, wherever here was. That I pushed myself to my feet, relying on instinct to guide me as I stumbled forward. In the murky emptiness, I nearly lost my balance. A sudden rush of icy air swept around me. It carried with it a faint trace of something familiar, a hint of lavender, like Maggie's hair conditioner. My heart leapt. Maggie! I cried again, louder this time. The whispering returned, but now it was accompanied by a low growl, like an animal lurking just out of sight. It sent shivers shooting down my spine. I turned in circles, searching for any sign of her. Just then, the ground shook beneath me, and I lost my footing, crashing back to the ground. Everything was spiraling, twisting like a maelstrom. I could almost make out shadows skittering past the periphery of my vision. Were they real, or just my imagination? I couldn't tell anymore. When I saw it, a glint of light breaking through the darkness, flickering like a distant star. I fought my way back to my feet, driven by an urgency I couldn't explain. But as I moved toward it, the shadows shifted again, more aggressive this time. The growl intensified, almost human-like in its malevolence. I sensed an intelligence behind it. Something was watching. I hesitated, feeling the oppressive weight of dread sink into my gut. I needed to keep going. With renewed determination, I dashed toward the light, but the shadows lashed out, clawing at my ankles. Get away from me! I yelled, kicking blindly at them. The light flickered faster, pulsing like a heartbeat. Just as I reached the edge of the illumination, a piercing scream shattered the air. It was Maggie. I whipped around, heart racing, desperate to find her, to help her. Maggie! But, in the chaos, the light flickered again, and the growling presence loomed larger, more menacing. I felt its breath on my neck, icy and suffocating. Run, I whispered to myself, but the shadows wrapped tighter, and I realized I might not be able to escape after all. The walls seemed to close in around me, a suffocating embrace of darkness. I could still hear Maggie's voice, her agonized scream clung to the air like a bitter echo. Maggie! I called again, desperation fueling my outburst. The shadows twisted with a life of their own, dancing chaotically, and I couldn't tell where the walls ended and the darkness began. That I forced myself to take a step back, blinking away the fear that clouded my mind. Somewhere in that suffocating void, there had to be a way out. Forcing myself to focus, I summoned every ounce of courage I had left. I remembered what that figure had said, you only need to believe. Maggie's presence, a thread of hope stirred within me. I thought of that teddy bear, the name sewn into its fabric. It made me believe that love could defy even the darkest of places. With that spark of hope, I took a deep, shaky breath and let it guide me forward. The shadows writhed as I stepped towards the flickering light, each movement feeling like an act of defiance. Instinctively, I felt for the glowing symbol from before, hoping it would lend me the strength I needed. My mind raced with thoughts of Maggie, of every day she'd spent alone in this twisted place, echoing the lonesome laughter I had heard cutting through the hospital's silence. As I turned back, I felt something shift in the energy around me. The shadows hesitated. Were they afraid? I took another step, and suddenly, the growling turned into an agonizing shriek, a sound that pulled a primal fear from deep within. "Stop!" I shouted, voice laced with fury. "You can't have her." The shadows recoiled, convulsing violently in response. I pressed onward, willing myself toward that trace of light. "Maggie!" I cried, hoping she could hear me. In that flash of brilliance, I saw her, a small shape huddled at the far end of the darkness. Her expression was wild, fear dancing like flares across her features. Instinct propelled me, and I lunged toward her. "I'm coming." As I reached her, the rushing shadows swarmed, angry and overwhelming. I grasped Maggie's arm tightly, feeling her warmth melding into my determination. "We're escaping," I breathed. I could barely hear myself over the chaotic sounds around us, but I felt her nod. The moment we locked eyes, it was as if a tether had formed between us, our fates merged in an unspoken promise. She took my hand, and together we turned toward the pulsing glow, the light growing brighter with each determined step. We surged toward the opening, and for a fleeting moment, time slowed. Those shadows screamed in agony, writhing around us like a living tempest, but we thrust ourselves into the breach of light together. Nothing could contain that bond. Their darkness, too deep, too haunting, could not extinguish our resolve. Just as we crossed the threshold, a powerful pull tugged at me, a final grasping of the shadows. I felt the cold tendrils wrap around my legs and waist, trying to drag me back into that abyss. But with one final surge of strength, I focused on Maggie and the warmth of her hand in mine and pushed through. There was a blinding flash, and the world around us twisted and fractured. When the light receded, we were no longer caught in the grip of oppressive shadows. I blinked against the sudden brightness, the air filling my lungs with sweet familiarity. We found ourselves back in the hospital hallway, disoriented yet relieved. The fluorescent lights buzzed, and it was ordinary again. My heart raced, knowing we had escaped, but the silence was unnerving. The echo of that child's laughter, the lullaby, still reverberated in my mind. "Maggie?" I whispered, chest constricting with both hope and trepidation. But she didn't answer. I searched her face, that familiar innocence now replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. "Where are we?" she finally asked, looking around as we stood before the empty pediatrics ward. "I think we're free," I said, uncertain if it was true. But the shadows from that twisted realm still lingered in the air. I couldn't ignore the feeling that they hadn't vanished. They lay in wait for the next soul lost in fear or grief. Maggie took a step back, eyes darting, fear pulsing through her once more. I could only catch a glimpse of what we had escaped, but the shadows of the hospital whispered promises in the corners, persistent echoes of the past. "I need to get you home," I said, instinctively wrapping my arms around her, hoping to shield her, but who could ever truly shield someone from darkness? Leaving Maggie to her uncertain future, I knew I had to get help. As we walked away from the pediatrics ward, the shadows flickered just out of sight, gliding along the edges of my vision. Questions lingered like a fog. Was Maggie real? What was lurking in those corners? Life resumed as if nothing had changed, but I carried the weight of the night in my bones. I could still hear that song echoing in my mind, the lullaby that begged me to come back. I wondered, perhaps even feared, if Maggie would be free or if the darkness would call her back, like a moth to a flame. That I moved to a different city after that. Sometimes I think about that night in the hospital or catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. But mostly, I try not to linger on unanswered questions.